Welcome to the Karuna Life Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gina Kitzmiller. I'm an intuitive, I'm an author, a Reiki master teacher, and I am founder of Trimatri Reiki. And today we are going to be talking with Donna Bishop. And Donna is a 59-year-old woman whose life was deeply shaped by her relationship with her own thinking. For much of her life, she felt controlled by her thoughts, caught in patterns, and eventually led her into addiction. For years, addiction wasn't just destructive, it was serving a purpose. It helped her cope, quiet her mind, and manage feelings she didn't yet understand. 12 years ago, she experienced a profound shift in how she understood her thoughts and the role they play in shaping our reality. And that insight changed everything. She came to see that our behaviors, even the ones that harm us, are attempts to help ourselves. And that real change doesn't happen by simply removing a behavior. It happens when we discover a new understanding that replaces what the behavior was providing. Although lacking in formal training, she spent the last 12 years deeply studying how we become trapped in thought created realities and how connecting with our innate wisdom can lead to lasting freedom. Today, she helps others see that they are not broken, that they are simply believing thoughts that were never meant to define them. So, I have been looking forward to this conversation for some time. Donna, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. And first, just thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for writing the book, Soul Walk, because without reading that, I don't know that I would, we would have, we would have connected, I think, but that book really opened the door and touched me in lots of ways. And then in your podcast, also all the past episodes that you've done is just so much good information. So thank you. But thank you for having me too, to tell the story, because I really know it's important. And I know that we all deserve to live a life that feels free and to where we can be the best that we can be. We really do. Everybody's trying to do their best, I think. I think that sometimes we just all get off on the wrong track.
Yes, I agree. And I know that we've talked obviously several times off of camera, but Donna would just share these little nuggets of wisdom. And I kept saying, gosh, like I would be jotting them down and I would say, well, I don't want to like take your quote, but this was such a good thought. I want to write this down. So I'm really looking forward to where the conversation goes today.
Me
But
too. Me too.
for people who don't know your story, can you take us back 12 years ago and tell me a little bit about what was going on with you at that time?
Well, I had gotten to where no one had ever said anything to me about what my thoughts were doing to me. I just felt if I had a thought, thoughts kept me safe. I thought that if I had a feeling or was believing something, that my thoughts were telling me that I needed to just believe it because that was the truth. And so I created a life that really wasn't meant for me. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, it didn't fit. And, I think we all, without even realizing it, reach for things to cope with and to help us numb out. Even if we don't really realize it, we all step out of what all of our thoughts are telling us sometimes. And I had gotten to where I was abusing prescription drugs. And so finally, after years of living and coping, being I guess what you call a functioning addict, I finally made the choice to go and check myself into a rehab for 7 weeks. And while I was there, I had a huge insight into how my thoughts were affecting my life and believing them, especially. Just we all have thoughts, but we don't have to believe them. It's not about not having the thoughts. It's about learning that when you have a thought that convinces you that you're not worth making good choices for yourself or that you don't deserve to make good choices for yourself, your life's not going to go in the right direction. There's still today a ton of shame that's attached to any addiction type, but it's 12 years ago, there just wasn't much out there. And when I started searching, I knew that I needed something that was going to have an undercurrent of kindness. And the things that was seeing from a lot of the places, it was kind of a tough love situation. And I also felt like I'd never had any control. And while some of the programs seemed like it was trying to teach people that they didn't have control over something, I needed to learn that I did have control. And so it was hard because I was trying to find a different something besides what I had just seen, which was 12 steps. And I think that first thing with addiction is that we've really got to see that one size does not fit all. That we think that everybody that say I had gone into AA and it hadn't worked for me. I think a lot of times people are just told, well, you're not serious about the program. You're not doing the work. it's not working for you, then you're not ready for it. And I don't think that's the case. I think that we're being sold up the creek on that because I think that there is a program out there that, it's just finding the right program that fits everybody because it takes a lot of time. And I don't think as a society, we want quick fixes. We want somebody to go away for 28 days and come back and hop right back into life like was going without any hiccups. And it's not going to do that. You've got to give yourself a lot of time, a lot of time.
I want to pause there. Can you
Yeah.
go? I'd love to go back and to talk a little bit about what was going on in your life when you talk about addiction. Like, what did a typical day look like for you when you were in the midst of addiction?
Well, I was abusing pain pills and benzos, Klonopin, Xanax, stuff like that. Stuff that my days had gotten turned upside down. My days and my nights. I didn't sleep hardly ever. I had lost a ton of weight, ton of weight. I mean, it was, mm, pills. When I first started taking them, there was such a relief. I thought I had found the cure. Really, I thought this lets me step outside of living in a life that's not doesn't feel right. My marriage at the time wasn't fit. We weren't connecting like we really should have. And it just, instead of giving that attention, I just shoved it down and learned that I could take a pill and ignore the reality of what was going on. And what worked so well, and this is what's so sad about addiction is that no one ever starts out saying that they're going to become addicted. No one ever thinks, oh, this is going to happen to me. We all think we have control over it. I was so worried about not, because I had seen alcoholism. I was so determined not to, get caught up in that I was so careful. But then my mind tricked me. And as humans, we're set up to where we want to feel good and we're going to do whatever it takes to feel good. And sometimes these behaviors are acceptable by other people. And that's what it boils down to. But I had gotten to where the pills that work so well, suddenly the downside of it is eventually they don't work so well. And eventually you start just losing yourself in them pretty much because eventually your body becomes physically dependent, which is what happened to me. And for years, I knew that I had to have the pills to be able to take a shower, to do anything. I had to have a handful of either, I took a combination of uppers and the opiates to keep me going. And my body, I knew if I didn't have it, I would be sick in the bed. I mean, really sick. And so it's a full-time job, just keeping up with your prescriptions, making sure that you can hide it, the lies that you have to tell it's a lot. It takes up a ton of headspace. Stay addicted. I mean, it's not a walk in the park. I mean, nobody, I promise, is wanting to live in that lifestyle. But when you've developed a behavior that's taught you how to exist for a long time, and most of the time people have, even if I would do other things, I would use food before the pills. I could see other areas where where I was doing things to cope with. But then when it finally got to where it was the pills, it was not acceptable finally. And I'm thankful now that I became addicted because I would have never found the answers that I found, which have been everything that have led me to all the answers pretty much to helping me. But it was it's a slow process to get to a point where you need to go to recovery. And I don't think that everybody needs to go into a recovery program and stay for weeks. I think there's lots of people that have issues and eventually can straighten it out them for themselves. But before I came an addict, I remember looking down my nose at people that had it, how could they let themselves do that? I felt like they were a little bit morally lacking. And so I think that the hardest part I had for a long time was the shame that came, with being that not to probably that was as hard to get over as as the actual, you have to learn how to feel a different way. You felt a certain way when you've had these chemicals in your body for so long. It's a new normal. And that takes a long time. And a lot of folks aren't going to be willing to do that for themselves. So it was a blessing that I got to go. I felt so fortunate that I was able to afford to go because a lot of insurance companies won't pay for freestanding clinics.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did your family, try to intervene, like, beforehand at any point or to say, "Hey, we have some concerns about this," and if so, like, what was your
Well,
reaction?
they had some concerns for sure, and that's one of the things that I've really thought hard about these past 12 years is how we have a system set up to where really we do nothing much for the families. I mean, I know that there's Al-Anon but even any program just about will tell you that if you're helping or when you love someone that's struggling, that you're being an enabler, that you're codependent, that we just don't have a lot of programs set up to offer to families that, and I saw how hard it was because you cannot, someone has to come to this decision themselves. You can't change the way a person's thinking about themselves. And that's basically what has to happen is that the person has to change how they see themselves. So to do that, that's going to have to come on their basis. But there are things you can do to help a person to get there. And first one of those things is kindness. I mean, really, instead of us meeting people with you're a piece of crap and need to get some help, um, there's a gentler approach I think that we could take with some things. But my family did know, and my it had gotten to the point to where I had to do something. I was either going to kill myself or, it had got to where I just couldn't make good decisions. I wasn't dependable. I was always too scared to push the limit too much. When I was in rehab, everybody was sharing their partying parties. I mean, the stories, and I didn't really have any partying stories. Wasn't like I was hooting it up. Literally, it was just taking pills to exist. I mean, but it just got to be where I couldn't remember what I said. Because some of the pills that I took literally are supposed to help you erase your thoughts, and they do but they erase your entire day. I mean, there would be blocks of time that I would completely lose. And and that was scary. And so
That
that was,
sounds very, like, unnerving to me,
yeah.
like, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, I can
Oh, yeah.
imagine, like, the next morning of, like, waking up and not
Oh,
remembering or
I
knowing
would
what the
have,
conversations
yeah.
were, right?
Yeah, right. You look down at your checkbook and you see where you've written checks that you didn't know you had gone to the store, but, um, when I go back and look at my journals, something that I've always done is writing. And I can see, oh my gosh, it's so hard to go back and look at my heart breaks for myself, really, is what happens because I was so lost and thought I didn't matter. Your thoughts, when you have a thought, it creates a feeling. And that feeling usually turns into an action. And that action, depending on what it is, it's going to create more thoughts. That's going to create more feelings. And do you see where I'm going? You get on this
Mhm.
hamster wheel, you feel bad. So you take too many pills. You take pills. Then you feel bad because you took the pills. And that was for a long time. Actually, when I finally realized I was and accepted that I was addicted, which was a long time before I got help, I was almost relieved because then that could be the problem. Because for so long, I couldn't figure out why did I not feel happy? Why was I so miserable all the time? What was going on? I saw other people and they seemed happy. What was I missing? W- Some people, I think, just don't get underneath the thoughts. Our thoughts come from our experiences that we've had in the past. That's where a thought comes from. I mean, most of our thoughts come from experiences. So when you've had hard experiences, we get caught up in replaying all those thoughts from the past experiences. And so it was learning how to step out of that cycle was the big part of it.
Now, tell me when you finally decide, I think I'd like to try some form of a recovery program.
Right.
And I know that we had talked and you said you went to the counselor. Can you talk a little bit about like that moment and kind of your response when he suggested a program and what was going on?
Right. Well, I always had seen a therapist for years. And, talk therapy. Let's talk about everything that's gone bad in your life forever and ever and ever. Let's talk, 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 talk. So finally, when I claimed to him that I had a problem and been taking pills, that I needed to get some help, he was so insistent that I go that day to a clinic. And I got home and I called the place and they were so unkind. I mean, just really.
Did you tell everyone what they said?
Well, she had said to me, she said, "Do you have any prior convictions?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Well, we understand that all drug addicts lie, so we'll be checking your records to see, and I just felt so embarrassed already. And I didn't have any convictions. I mean, I wasn't lying. I mean, why would I lie at that point? I know the type person I am. And the big thing was that I didn't want to have to be held accountable to go to a meeting to be okay. And she said, you're going to be, you'll have to go to 90 days and 90 meetings in 90 days. And something clicked in my head and I knew, oh, that won't happen. I don't, I just, what I wanted, I knew I wanted to come from inside of me and not to be attached to a sponsor or, a meeting or a mantra. Do you know what I'm saying? I wanted it to be true.
That makes sense. And we're not saying for anyone watching or listening that AA is not beneficial because it
Right.
is to some
Right,
people.
right. It's
It
just the only deal we've had in town. That's the thing. I
Sure.
mean, and while lots of people have, and I understand, when I first got home, I thought that everybody needed to go to Gulf Breeze Recovery. That's where I went, which is a holistic program. And they work with, getting your body is healthy and your mind healthy. And they followed a program that's based off the three principles, which is mind, consciousness, and thought, and how we take our thoughts and turn them into our realities. We think that we believe them. And so it's really finding the right place. They were putting several commercials and I saw their commercial. My son saw their commercial and brought me their website. But it was just hard because like I said, you don't want to, you say, I don't think that this program's for me. It's thrown in your face that, well, you're just not ready to try, that
Yeah.
means that you're not.
Yeah, I'm curious. So so obviously when they had recommended the traditional AA
Right,
program, that didn't feel like a good fit to you. When
right,
you called Gulf Breeze, or did you call Gulf
right. I
Breeze?
did, I
What
did.
was the difference in the conversation that sparked that? Oh, I think this might actually work
Well,
for
the
me.
first thing he said to me, I just in hearing his voice, there was a kindness that was underlying. And he said, have you ever thought that maybe your thoughts are making you so miserable? And there was something about that that no one had ever said. And after years of therapy, I'd never heard anything like that. And also, I had said to him, I said, well, do you believe in tough love? And he said, well, we kind of feel like maybe tough love is what's gotten you here. And we're just going to give you love and teach you how to love yourself. And there was something about that really sparked in me because I knew I did not love myself at all. I didn't believe that I could make the right choices for myself. So for me to stand up and to make that choice, it was a big deal. And that was what was kind of amazing to me was that all of a sudden I had gotten this extreme clarity to make the choice that I did and to hear and see, and I had, and while when I first got to Gulf Breeze, like I said, when I came home, I was so excited. I wanted everybody to go to Gulf Breeze, but everybody's different. And if you get something from the 12, I think that that's great. And it has helped a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that it hasn't helped. And we're not doing them any justice by just saying too sad, so bad, you're just left, and,
Right.
and the way that our system is set up to where we want to punish. And there's no studies that show that anybody's ever done well from confrontation, that no one has benefited from the confrontation. It doesn't change the situation. You may get someone to do something out of sheer fear, but they're not going to truly make the flip and change their life for you, you know. I mean, at the end of the day, we ask people stop doing something, a behavior that they have been depending on that's been serving them for a long time. And we don't give them anything, this just call a sponsor or white knuckle it or, try to just bear down and not do that doesn't work for a lot of people.
So when you make the decision to go to Gulf Breeze, did you have to stop taking pills beforehand?
Well, that's a good point. One of the things that was so hard for me when I had stopped for in the past, when I ran out of pills and would get so sick, I knew there was no way that I could check myself into a clinic being so sick at the time. And a lot of the 12-step programs require that you be in the midst of withdrawals. They don't want you having used anything. And at Gulf Breeze, it was do whatever it takes to get you through the door. And sometimes that's what it takes. And then when I got there, they had a medical care unit that they helped me detox from. And there are drugs now that they can give you to help ease you off of stuff so that it's not as dangerous and as hard. And, it's about changing the way you're thinking about yourself. And when you do that, you want to make better choices. So your life changes. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. It's
It,
almost like
it's
that puzzle piece kind of clicks into place and then it just kind of resolves not
right,
on its own, because I'm sure you do the inner work and
right.
everything that's needed. I'm curious when you go in and they help you out with that medically, was the withdrawal as bad as you had anticipated going in?
Well, it was worse when I would try to do it at home because I think when I was at home, I was scared and I didn't know if I was dying or something, what I mean? Because it is rough. It is, you feel it's like the worst flu you've ever had. I was nauseated really bad, muscle cramps, um, you just feel really rotten. And they had a setup to where they had us get to saunas and sweat it out a lot, which helped. They just had things to help get the process of detoxing. So, and also they had a nurse there that was with me 24 hours a day that if I needed something, and she was just an angel. And I wasn't as afraid because I had someone there that was saying, "You're all right. I can get you something to help that. I can help with it. You're okay." Just having that. And before, when I would be at home detoxing, it was bad. I mean, it was hard. Just getting to the bathroom would be about all you could manage. And so for about 11 days, I stayed in detox. And after that, and it is like the flu. You just sort of start to finally start to come back out of it to where your body starts to feel. And I remember probably the first day that I was started to feel somewhat normal. And it had been years, Gina, since I had a day that I felt like a normal human being without a handful of pills. And it was a revelation to me. I never thought that I could get to that point. And it was because every time before when I had tried to detox myself at home, I couldn't give myself the time. I'd give myself a long weekend or a week, maybe if I could do that long, but you couldn't, life was going on. So to check out a life, for 7 weeks to give just to you, it was a beautiful thing. It was really, when I think back to my time there, it was probably the most important time in my life.
So when you're there in terms of like the withdrawal, do they start the program or do they just allow you to kind of go through the withdrawal process and
Right.
then they kind of know or you determine like when you're ready to start that second, I would assume kind of that second part to it of like, okay, let's
Right.
start to take a look at it. So I'm also wondering too, were you at all resistant? It sounds like you were mostly ready and you were starting to have some realization, but I'm also wondering, was there any pushback of like, "Oh, I don't believe this
Oh,
stuff,"
yeah. Oh,
or
yeah. Well, you know, after you get to start feeling better, things are easier to understand a little bit. You become, but I didn't have a clue that it was going to really work. I really didn't. I mean, I was hoping it would, but I felt like, what have I got to lose? Just sit here and listen to what they have to say. Because after you get through the detox part, they have it set up to where you have classes, and we would start about 8 every morning, and all day we would have different classes. They would have different speakers, different therapies that we would do. And it was just different ways to teach us about our thought, all day, every day. And finally, I was standing in line to get breakfast the next morning, and one of the counselors was standing across from me. And I told him, I said, it just seems too simple. And he said, "That's why people don't get it. It's because they think it's just too simple. We want it to be hard. We think it's going to be something that's so complicated, and it's not." And I literally started to tingle when he said that, because I felt that enlightenment, that there was something different. And that really, when I felt the fact that I could let go of my thoughts, because they taught us how to meditate. And, people, when you say meditate, people think, oh, they really don't. And meditation really, it's important to try to do a guided meditation, which yours are wonderful, because it shows you how your thoughts are doing. When you're slowing down and you're concentrating on a part of your body or whatever, you can see those thoughts that come because it makes you aware of what's going on. And they started with that, teaching us how to pay attention to our thoughts, and it just built off of that. But it was a pretty early on. My interest was piqued, and I felt that shift, and there was something there, and I got the tingle. It was enlightening that I felt. I all of a sudden, it's just I had the tingles, I guess you could say, just for big time of knowing that there was the hope was fixed to come big time. I mean, it really started pouring in after that, and it it takes, even after you get off of the drugs, it takes a long time for your brain to reroute itself.
Like
It's
that. That's a good way to put it.
we get to thinking, so when you have a thought and it builds like a little path, and then you think it again, and it makes the path deeper, and then you think it again. And so when we've got a thought, say, I'm a piece of crap. I'm a piece of crap. I'm a piece of crap. Well, guess that path. So the first time something happens, guess what? You're going to jump on that path. You're going to get right back in that path because you thought that same way. So to create a new path, you got to think a new way. It takes time. It takes attention. And, you know, everybody has bad days and has a lot of thought. But when I can sit down and slow myself down and say, okay, Donna, this isn't real. I mean, 98% of our thoughts are bullshit. I mean, literally. I mean, they're not, they're just not real, but we don't know. No one had ever told me that ever in my life. And when I learned it, they just really helped us to find different therapies to help us to be able to do that more and more and more. I mean, was the 12 step was that I felt like if I had to stand up every week and say that I was a drug addict, that I would stay a drug addict. And I'm not a drug addict anymore. I don't feel like it's going to ruffle some feathers when I say this, but I don't really feel that addiction is a disease because I think that it sets us up to think that we don't have any control over it when we believe that. And I feel like we do have some control and a lot more than we realize we have. And for some people, and I think this is where AA comes in, is good. Some people, I think, goes through their life thinking that they have control over everything. And they need to learn that they can't be that way. But for some of us, we've gone through life feeling like we couldn't control anything and that we have no control or self reliance. And so to learn that we can trust ourselves and we can believe in ourselves is what we got to do. And if I'm going to stand up and think that I have a disease that I had never have any control over, it it just makes it feel like it's a little bit like you've already given up, kind of in some ways.
Yeah,
Sometimes
I
to
could
me,
see what it sounds like you are saying that you find it disempowering, that instead
very much.
of empowering,
Yeah,
which it might be for some people, like if I'm
right,
speaking my truth and if I'm understanding, it sounds like for you, it felt more that you were affirming something that you didn't want to be and
right,
didn't view yourself as. So if I'm getting
right,
up and I'm saying I am this
right,
every single day, for you, it just is like, that's not what I am, right?
right,
And
right, right.
so, okay, that actually I've never thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense
Well,
to
it's a
me.
self-fulfilling prophecy. When we focus on something, it's going to grow. I can tell by looking at my body. Things get bigger when we focus on something. So if all you're focusing on is don't take a drink, don't take a drink, don't take a pill, don't take a pill. Guess what? All you're thinking about is taking a pill. Learning how to not have the feelings that, or the thoughts, or recognize the thoughts that make you have those feelings that make you want to have the pill is what you've got to take care of. And we can't ask people to stop doing something that has supported them without teaching them how to get on top of their thoughts that are making them feel like they needed to escape and how to love themselves. I mean, I guess about the third week there, when I got out of through the detox part, I was filled with this self love that I'd never had before. But I think that a lot of women were so selfless. We're just raised to be selfless and to think about everybody else. And I never really thought about what was best for me. And so it felt strange to feel that way, but that was a big turning point for me, was just learn to love myself because everybody deserves that.
Yeah, it's an incredible shift. I'm wondering when you got home, what that was like for you.
It's real hard. I mean, I had to change my entire life pretty much. And I'm not saying that everybody has to change their entire life, but you've got to change. You cannot go back to live in the life that you were in previously exactly the same and expect to have a different outcome. And so when I came home, my now ex-husband, he had moved out and we were started to get in the process of getting a divorce. And so that was what was so scary was that because, I'm having to face the scariest thing in my life, getting a divorce after 28 years of marriage and moving out of the house I'd lived in for so long. And I don't love change. But I couldn't take what I had been my deal, but the way that I coped for so long. And I think everybody, especially my family, was like, oh my gosh, she's going to probably return back to. And I did try to go back to using a couple of, I found a few pills and thought, oh, I'll try this and see if it'll hit. And because my brain knew the game, the gig was up. It didn't work. I couldn't trick myself anymore, if that makes sense. You
It
can't.
does. I'm wondering what that was like for you. Were you like,
Oh,
was
I was
that
I was real frustrated. I
I
mean, I
was
thought,
gonna
well,
say, are
dang.
you like angry? Are you
Yeah, I was real
frustrated? Are
kinda
you
irritated.
happy?
It was kind of a, "Oh, well, alrighty." I mean, I guess you showed me. That was when it was like, "Okay, I guess I am going." Because it was scary. It was so scary to change everything, I mean, because we get into these lives and we don't even realize a lot of times what we're doing is on autopilot. We're not making choices that really feel grounded and right for us. And to start doing that was very scary, but it was the whole time, though, I kept relying on just going back to what I learned about don't let these thoughts, just because you're having it, doesn't mean it's true. It's not a fact. We have thoughts that tell us, don't pull out in front of the train, we're going to get killed. So we think all of our thoughts are facts. They're not. I mean, 90%, like I said, they're not, but we think that they are. And so that's what I had to keep going back on was realizing that, Donna, there's a life out there that you have no idea exists. And there's hope. And when I started letting myself feel that, I would get excited about things and it would help me pull through. But it was hard. It was very hard. I mean, it's when I say people, we don't want to give folks time to do that, because it took me about 3 years to get a divorce. And so for that time, I was really just spending it on me, just trying to do what I needed to do to keep me feeling like I had control over things. And I think a lot of times in the past, before I went to rehab, I didn't do that. I didn't speak up and say, I need this, I need that. I just went along with what everybody else seemed to think was best.
Did your family have a hard time with that? Like the new Donna? Like you come back
But
and
a
they're
little bit,
probably
yeah. Well, yeah, especially my ex husband. Yeah, they did. It was, I think that they didn't know how to take it really at first. But, when I went into rehab, you're gray and I was skinny and you just look bad. And when you come out, you're so healthy and my head was so clear. And that was the thing that was, I think that really shocked them was how I was so calm all of a sudden because I had not been calm before,
that makes sense. So your family kind of adjust. Obviously, you say that
Yeah,
you kind of went through the changing, which I can imagine going through that much change of a
right.
divorce and changing homes, which is just a huge transformation and just a very difficult time. Um, so was there a point like, I love that you say that you kind of had that hope of, I know what this story looks like, right? Pills and an unhappy
Mhm,
marriage,
mhm.
and this isn't working for me, and I don't know what's over, like, that next hill,
Right,
right? So I'm
right,
like, I'm going this way, which I
right,
love that because it's just you don't know, but it also
uh,
sounds very scary of there was no
right,
guarantee that this path was going to be different or happier,
right.
and then so now you're shifting into something completely different, but yet it's unknown. So was there a point when you were on the new path that you were like, "This is actually really good, and I'm actually excited to continue and keep going?"
Well, you know, when you've lived with your thoughts against you, working against you, you see things as most everything is working against you. And there'd be when I came home, because it'd be changing the way I would get underneath my thoughts sometimes, but there was still when I would stop and say, like have a little come to Jesus talk with myself, I would reel myself back in. And I would pick up the phone and call my mom. I would call several friends that I had and talk about it, and talk about, hey, I'm having these thoughts. And when you say things out loud, a lot of times you'll realize that they don't make as much sense. And also, I've started paying attention to the way I talk to myself. But it took when I got to when I really opened my eyes and started just seeing how much fun life was. I didn't think life was going to be any fun, to be honest with you, because, you've been numb to everything for the most part. And I thought, well, it's gonna be boring. I'm not gonna be funny anymore. And oh my gosh, everything was so funny all of a sudden. Everything, I just life was so much easier, really. It was just it never even though going through divorce was hard and even going through moving was hard and finding a rental, all that, it still was so much easier than when I was living with my addiction. Do you know what I mean? When I came home, even though it was all hard, it was still so much easier because my mind was clear, if that makes sense. I would see like little I'd see something, I'd be successful at it, and I would stop and say, good for you. You accomplished that. And I had not ever done that before. I had not been complimentary or talked to myself with any kindness. And that was the big part that changed, I think, everything.
I love that. So I'm curious, like, how does life look today now that you're 12 years through this? How is it different today?
Oh my gosh. Completely. It's just the freedom and the joy you could being able to tap into my joy now is so much easier. Um, Being able to see and meet other people and see where they are and where they're coming from and really see them, not just because when you're living in that veil of all the chemicals, nothing is reality really. Do you know what I mean? You don't see people for who they truly are. You don't see yourself for who you truly are. So today, getting to see, just how with having new grandbabies and just all the things that I mean, gosh, so much of I would have missed out on if I hadn't gotten it straightened out, I mean, because life is hard for a lot. And we have these experiences and we think that the rest of our life is going to be hard because of the past experiences and our thoughts convince us that everything is going to be hard because the past was hard. So we can only imagine what we've experienced. We can't let ourselves imagine something even more. So learning to exercise that muscle and say, oh, there's stuff out there you can't even begin to imagine that could happen. The goodness, the good stuff, because, and that's the way I feel now is I don't have a clue as to what's coming, but it's all so exciting because not knowing, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I know it's going to be good. I mean, it's not, used to, I always had a little sort of veil of dread or something. Hey, and that's not there anymore at all.
Wow, that sounds amazing. As a mom, I'm curious as to what your kids say, like about how you were before you went into
Mhm.
the program and then how you are in the years after.
Um, you know, at first, when I first went to Gulf Breeze, I thought that I was going for them. I thought I want to get straightened up so I could, be a mom, be the best mom I can be. And when I got there and I realized, no, 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 I got to do this for me. And then that's going to be how I give to them. I mean, giving that to me was the best gift I could give to them. And when I got home, I think both of them, especially my youngest, has said he felt like he got his mom back, the old mom, the original mom, the one that before I let all the thoughts and then the chemicals convince me of who I was. And I think that it took time. But when I came home, one of the big things that I did was I let go of the shame that I had carried around because I could not believe I had let myself get to that point. I was so embarrassed, so disappointed in myself for them. I didn't want to be that mom. And I wanted, but when I came home, I told him, I said, I can't spend the rest of my life being sorry for that time. I am sorry. And I'm saying that now, then, but I knew I couldn't go through the rest of my life trying to say, I'm so sorry. Because I used to say, I'm sorry for everything. I was sorry. I mean, I used to all the time say, I'm sorry, just because I think I was sorry for existing in some ways, but being able to let myself be who I needed to be for them too. I didn't spend my time trying to be, ashamed of what I'd done. I just spent my time trying to be better. And I think and what's the best part about it is that I can see and I hear them say things where they've picked up, like I'll hear one of them say, well, I was just in my thoughts or, or I'm having a good day because I chose to have a good day, you know, a- and so I know it's wearing off some of the stuff that I talk about, the mumbo jumbo that I talk all the time about thought. So, but it was so hard because I felt like, I let them down for a long time, and as a mom, nobody wants to that's the worst for me, I think. But it was my relationship with them now is both really close and it's, been wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to find a way to help yourself so that you can share it to your kids and share, because life is hard. I knew they would have some struggles. I mean, because I think that that's a lot of times when we say that addiction is, genetic, it's because we've seen our relatives handle things. And it's not that it's in our DNA, that it's in our behavior. We've watched others behave that way. So guess what? We behave that way. And I wanted my boys to know how to handle things and not have to depend on a substance to help them handle it, if that makes sense. I mean, I wanted that for them.
It does make sense. And also, I think even if it doesn't have to deal with the realm of addiction, just seeing a parent go through something that
Mhm,
transformative and
mhm.
been difficult and to say, wow, she really like did the work and dug in and came through it. There's a bunch of lessons, right? Our parents
Right,
aren't perfect people. I think there would be something really powerful, even just in watching that example of watching someone go through, something that is very hard and difficult and coming through the other end with grace and kindness
right,
would
right. And
be a
it's
great
not about
example.
not ever having bumps in the road. You're gonna have bumps in the road. We all, as human beings, are trying our best, really. It's just learning to help folks that get on the wrong path sometimes. Because I think, like I said earlier, I think that, no one goes into it and says, "Oh, I'm fixing to throw my life in the crapper here." I mean, I'm, they're just trying to get through the day. I mean, really, that's how it starts. It's not, no one means for it to be. And that's I wish that we could change the way that we talk about addiction a lot, the way that the labels that we give and the way that we feel like, people that are struggling with addiction just need to be locked up and thrown away. And that's sad to me. That's real sad because I feel like a lot of people, those that are struggling, I think people have said that we don't care. And I think that we care too much. I think that a lot of times we're trying the hardest and we just want it to be okay. And sometimes the way that we're trying to be okay is not acceptable, you know?
And we all have unhealthy coping mechanisms or
Right. All
dysfunctional
of
behaviors
us.
or patterns. And I wanted to, because it was on my mind to bring this up, is there was a client that I would say that had the most beautiful heart that I have ever felt in anyone's field, like just like knock you over. And it was someone who had an addiction and he was still in the throes of addiction. And his heart was the kindest, I would say the closest to what I would say Jesus energy that
Right.
I had ever felt. And if we could all live as that man was in his heart, although on the outside you would have said his life's a mess, he was struggling. And it really taught me something of like,
Right.
wow, it wasn't someone that you would have said was a
No.
spiritual teacher or someone. This is someone who, and I would say in his case, was doing his soul's contract, which was he
Mhm.
was meant to be in that community. And he was really sharing his soul's energy and gifts to those who were struggling with addiction because he was so kind and
Right.
that heart energy. And I think he would side up to people and just talk about just anything in general, but they were
Right.
still in his energy. And I always think about him when I think about addiction is that his really beautiful heart energy that came through. So
It's I always, even as a child, I just wanted everybody else to be okay. My okayness depended on everybody else's okayness. And growing up in a home that was filled with, it was divorce and hate, it was hard to do that. I couldn't always manage that. And so I carried that into adulthood, just want everybody to be, and sometimes that means, that for me, that meant shoving down how I felt. And, that could have created some problems eventually. You just
But
can't.
yeah, you sound like my husband Joe. That's how he was. It was everyone else was okay, and
Yeah.
if you asked him if he was okay, he would tell you he was. Like, "Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Oh,
no,
I'm fine. I'm
really
fine.
capable,
Good.
I got it,"
Mm,
and, I think that he really struggled with that to say, like,
sure.
I'm actually not okay," and so, obviously, he had issues with alcoholism, and I will say that I wanted to also bring up with him that he was a doctor and
Right.
that there's not really great rules or regulations or support really for physicians or people who are in the
Mm,
medical field. And for him, his only option was he went into the AA program. This is way back, I think maybe like 2015. And they had what was called the first bite rule, which I thought was a really odd term, but it meant that they gave him one time to go through the program and then he was mandated to drug testing and he had to do so many meetings and they had to sign off, on his paper. And I know he didn't care for that. And it wasn't that there were some things of AA that I think he did like, and yet it was almost the way I look at it as like a religion. Like it was like he went to a church and it just wasn't the right fit for him. Like,
right.
and he
Right.
wanted it to be,
Right.
and he would keep going, but it just
Right.
never really seemed to click with him.
Mhm.
And so, he did manage, I think, really through white knuckling, had 5 years of sobriety, and then he relapsed, and the issue was then he couldn't go back and reuse the first bite rule because you only get it once. And so for him, he was terrified he was gonna lose his medical license,
Sure.
which means we lose our livelihood, we
Sure.
have children, we have our home,
Oh my
and
gosh.
I just remember thinking there has to be a better way to support people, and I understand that we're trying to protect, patients if he was seeing them, but yet it really felt like he got backed into a corner, and
Yeah.
then there really wasn't any great option for him to get the help that he needed because he had this weight that was ready to come down on him at any moment.
Right. See, that's another thing that bothers me, and that's to expect someone to get it and to flip it and change their life is really impossible. I mean, that one, but to think that because they're not giving you any behavior to replace with that behavior that they're asking you to give up. So how's that going to work? Well, I mean, when you've been relying on something and all of a sudden you can't rely on it, so what do you do then? Being able to step up if you make a mistake and say, "Hey, I'm screwed up, but I'm not done. I'm going to pick up where I was from you and go on." And a lot of time with the 12 steps, they don't see it as that way. I think they want you to go back to start one, to day one. And you don't lose those days that you've already learned something from, if that makes sense. You don't have to go back to where you were before because, and the fact that we don't offer, why, I'm sure Joe felt like he had no choice or option in the matter.
No, he did. I think he felt
Yeah.
very,
Cornered.
yeah, cornered and that there's not a real clear option. I'm
Right.
like, "Okay, so what do I do? Do I
Right.
chance losing my livelihood,
Right.
potentially my career for years, potentially forever? Or do I try to manage the unmanageable, with very little resources or help?" Which is
Yeah.
ultimately what he tried and it didn't work well. So,
We yeah, you
yeah.
ask him to he was being asked to exist with what had been helping him exist. People aren't gonna be successful with that, I mean, when
Yeah, I'm amazed that he got 5 years,
I
frankly. But, I
really
mean, it
think, yeah,
shows his, like, strength of
he has some
character
oh,
that
yeah,
it was like, I'm gonna
that's some
white knuckle
serious
this.
willpower.
Yeah, yeah, it is. That's a show too. That's really funny. Yeah, so I wanted to touch on that just because I think there's really some areas that
Oh, big. See, because it shouldn't be that way. I mean, it needs I'm like you, I understand that they're trying to protect patients. The fact that there's this no second chance, that's just I don't see people being successful in long run when you know that there's no I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't sometimes I feel funny about saying recovery because recovery means to go back to what you were, and I don't feel like I've gone back to where I was. I feel like I've moved past that point. Does that make sense?
and you had said before you used the word discovery instead of
Yeah, I
recovery,
feel like
and I liked
it's
that.
been a discovery, much more of a discovery than a recovery because I didn't want to go back to what if I had gone back to that, then I would have gone back to having to have the same coping skills to exist. And that's one of the things that I think that kind of drops the ball with some programs is they ask you to give up this behavior without telling you how to handle that or replace it with something that's going to. And a lot of times you'll see people that sobriety is the only goal in town. So they come home, they don't drink, but they're still raging, they're still full of anger, they still hate their life, and they're basically a dry drunk is what they call that. I mean,
Yeah, dry drunk periods are not fun as a family
no,
member because there's not much you can do because you
right,
know that they're not drinking,
miserable.
and
Yes,
yet their behavior is identical,
yes,
and all of the thought patterns and the emotions and the struggle.
yes.
It's very frustrating as a family member. I thought that was almost as hard, I would
Oh,
say,
I'm sure it
as
is.
when he was actively
Hmm.
drinking. So there
Hmm.
wasn't something I
You
could
can
point
blame it
to and
on.
say, "Fix."
Yes,
Yeah, it was
yes.
just like
What do we do
so
now? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It just I would say a lot of unhappiness, I think, for him
Sure
in
it was. But,
moment.
that was Joe's thoughts inside of his head convincing him that he had no choice. He didn't know that he could not believe the thoughts that were telling him that he had to have a drink.
Yeah, I don't think he ever really looked into any other types of programs. So I think for him that there wasn't that I think he was trying to find some books and resources, but I don't think he
Right,
ever had found anything that really clicked for him the way that you did.
right, right. Yeah, I don't when I think about my situation, it literally is a miracle, really. I mean, the way and I think that's why I'm here is because it's meant for me to tell people about this because I know I would have loved to have heard when I probably maybe would have looked or thought about getting into help earlier on because I thought that all I had was the one shot wonder of AA. And so I didn't really want to try, because I didn't know about there was other choices out there. And, this was back when 12 years do you remember when all of the movie star rehab started coming about, all the hoity-toity ones, and that's what I guess they're still in existence. And in rehab recovery, there's a huge industry in recovery. There's a lot of people struggling. And I think it's important for folks to know that there are other options out there. And if you've tried something and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you're stuck with it. There are other programs out there that you can try.
Yeah, that's an important point. So let me ask you, what would you say to someone that might be kind of in the midst of a struggle? Maybe they've kind of had a thought or two of potentially a recovery program. What would you want to say to them?
Um, to take your time and to listen to what you need and to be kind to yourself and to find I think that any program that's not based off of kindness is not going to work. I don't have a lot of faith in a program that lacks kindness. I think that I would tell someone to take their time to research it, to look into that there is help. That's the first thing. That there is a way that you can figure this out. Everything is figure outable. But to just jump into it and think it's going to be an easy fix, it's not. But you're worth it. You're worth the work. And it is work. But it is so worth it to Mm, to just be able to change the way that you've thought about yourself. Gosh, it's just can't even explain it.
Oh, I like that. So if you could go back and talk to your younger self,
Mhm.
like before you went into recovery, I'm curious as to what you would say to her.
Probably just hang on, because I wouldn't want anything to change. I wouldn't want to not experience the hard stuff. I wouldn't want to hurt some of the people that I've hurt, but at the same time, things had to happen the way they happened to get to where I am today. And I wouldn't be sitting here if not all of that had happened. And so just hang on, just hang, because, I don't, back then, I don't think that I would have listened if I told myself anything much anyway. you know, because I wouldn't have gotten it. So that would be, I think it just hang in there, just hang on because it's coming. I mean, and there is so much better than you can imagine.
Oh, good. I like that. I think we will end on that. So, one last question. What do you see for yourself now in the future?
Well, I hope to get this message out more and more. I really want to work on that. I really want to work on getting a website going. I really want to reach people, let them know that there are other plans out there that they can try. There's other choices that you don't have to stay stuck in this awful place that addiction puts so many of us in, that you deserve better. Everybody deserves better. Every single human being that's breathing air on this earth deserves better. If they want to ask for it, they need to get it. And it's hard because so many people, I don't think, feel like they deserve it or don't think that they can change. And I saw people coming in to rehab that were in their 70s changing. You don't have to, it's never too late to change. It's never too early to change. It's never, I mean, if you're living your life feeling like you've got to depend on something to get you through your day, you don't, mm, no, you don't have to live that way. You really don't. I mean, life's hard, but we can figure it out.
I
I
like
mean, it's always figure-outable.
you always have so many, like, quotable quotes that
Thank you.
like, I might, like, wanna write that one down.
Go feel free.
So thank you. I was like, I might take that. Um, okay, so I will put your contact information,
Yes,
hopefully a website that is in
yes,
development so that people
right.
will have a way to get a hold of you. And as always, if you like this podcast, please consider leaving us 5 stars and following. We would be really grateful. But I have a feeling this is not the last conversation we will have on the podcast.
Well, I
So
hope not.
I look forward to having you on again, Donna. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
so
being
much.